We're back to the Neil Haley Show. I'm excited first to welcome my co-host, Paul Hollis, author of the Hollow Man series and owner of many different companies. Paul, how are you? Know you're excited about our guest.
I'm always excited to see Bill Nelson. He has written a book that's just almost ready to be released. It's in pre-order now, so guys out there, get your pre-orders in on this book because it's great. It's action adventure, it's mystery, it's romance, it's a thriller. It's got all kinds of things in it. So, this is one you don't want to miss. So, welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill. So we're going to kind of delve into specifically enough beyond the pages of Blood and Fire and a deep dive into coastal mysteries with author Bill Nelson. All right, so let's talk about the intricate characters, the shades of gray and black in the black and white world. Can you kind of go into about these characters a little deeper into the characters?
Yeah, so the protagonist, as I've discussed before, is a guy that's kind of a full spectrum guy. He's capable of being very black and very white and very gray. And I think that uh, he's not uncommon in that way. He's like a lot of people, maybe most people. Uh, Generally speaking, he tends to err on the side of of the good side of the force, but sometimes he can go all the way dark, especially if he thinks his family is threatened or somebody that he loves is threatened. Then he can be absolutely ruthless, and so that personality type uh, is actually reminiscent of people I have known, and even of my own family. And I had an uncle, and one of the characters in the book is loosely based on one of my uncles, and my this uncle was a notorious bad guy. He was, very feared around Houston, and had a long history of being extremely harsh with people. And yet, as his nephew, he was very sweet and very kind to me. And as a child, I really noticed that a lot. That I knew everything about him. I'd heard all the stories, but yet my personal interactions with him were super pleasant, and it always was a little bit difficult for me to reconcile that. And he was the kind of guy that, if I had car trouble or anything, happen anytime, day or night, he'd be my first call. He was the guy that I would call because he would come and fix it, and never mention it to my mom or my dad or anybody else. He'd keep it to himself, and it would be, our little secret. Of course, I don't know if maybe he planned on leveraging that against me down the road or something, but he didn't live long enough for me to find out. And but it's just that kind of uh, extreme difference in demeanor and approach was something that really informed several of the characters in the book, actually.
Okay, let's talk about how do personal experiences and observation influence the portrayal of the characters' inner struggles.
Say that again.
How do personal experiences and observations influence the portrayal of characters' inner struggles?
Well, so I think that because some of the subject matter is personal, right? And it comes out of my personal well of experiences. Uh, I think it helped me to kind of keep a lot of those things grounded and not go overboard and really make it real. And because I live those things, right? And I know that there is a lot in the world of authoring about excitement and adventure and sensationalism, but I think I lean more on trying to keep some of those things simple and credible and grounded, and that came out of my own experience. So I think the net of that is that maybe those situations are a little bit more believable, so that when you're reading it and you hear about the protagonist doing this ridiculous thing that he does, but you'll kind of understand the context of it, and it's presented to you in a kind of a simple, grounded way. Maybe it's a little bit more believable.
All right. So we're going to delve into the high stakes conflicts portrayed in your novel. We talked about this in the first episode. How do real world events and challenges faced by coastal communities influence these fictional elements?
Oh yeah, well there's a lot of that, right? So I drew a lot from actual things that I've witnessed growing up around here and people that I know. And so, the book talks about, the Italian mafia presence in Galveston and along the Bayshore and up in the city. That's a very real thing. Of course, I changed all the names, so I didn't use any of the actual names. But I grew up knowing a lot of those people. In fact, I dated for a long time. I dated a girl who was from that world, and dated her on and off for like a decade. So there is a lot of that. And then the kind of the conflicts that the fisherman community goes through, the commercial fishing community goes through. That's all based on real things. In particular, we've had various different groups of fishermen vie for domination of the particularly fruitful part of the Gulf Coast between, Beaumont and Corpus Christi, where there's some enormous fisheries. We have, fishermen that come down from Louisiana, and there's a group of fishermen out of Port Arthur, Texas, that's always really trying to have a dominant footprint. And some of those situations can get a little hairy. Not so much lately. It seems to have all been kind of worked out in recent years. But when I was a kid growing up, you'd hear about people getting into gunfights out there in the Gulf because of people fishing in the fisheries where they weren't supposed to be fishing. And then add to that the big port, which is Port of Houston. So it's probably Port of Houston is the largest port by dollar value in the world. So there's more, commerce flowing in and out of that port than any other port literally in the world. And it's not the biggest port by tonnage or volume, but by dollar value, it's really massive. And so it's very important to the state of Texas. It's very important to the city of Houston. And if in their official capacities they decide to run over some fishermen to optimize their tax base or whatever that looks like, they're not opposed to doing it. So there's some of those things that come into play as well.
Impressive. Let's go to the cinematic vision from novel to potential screenplay. Explore the visual elements with the novel and discuss the potential for adapting Blood and Fire into a screenplay.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I do think about. So I think ultimately, and I mentioned in one of the previous interviews that I was really positively influenced by the whole Yellowstone series. And so I kind of think if I could do it the way I really see it in my mind, is it would be a Netflix series, right? To where, each book in the series of books would be a whole season. And that way I think you'd have the proper time investment to really do the story justice. And then, one of the things in movies that really stuck out to me over the years, I was watching Forrest Gump, and there's a scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest and Captain Dan survive a hurricane. And the next morning, the sun is coming up over the Gulf, and they're on the boat, and they're happy that they survived. And somehow in the midst of that, they got a great catch out of it. And Captain Dan decides to jump over the side of the boat into the Gulf. And when I watched that scene, I knew what the water smelled like. I knew what the water felt like. I knew what the air felt like. I knew everything about that. And so those kinds of images are things that I would like to have in a visual representation, so I definitely would want it to be shot, on the Gulf or in the lower Atlantic or someplace where you could really kind of capture that element in those in that image, that kind of imagery. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does. So best place people can find information is go. The book is available on Amazon, right?
The book is available on Amazon Kindle, available for pre-order on Kindle. It'll be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and bookstores everywhere January 31st.
All right. It was a week away till the big launch, but people get your pre-orders because who knows how many books are going to be available once we get that out there. That information seems really interesting, Bill, and we appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
You're listening, watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.